Network Automation Nerds podcast. Hello and welcome to Network Automation Nerds podcast, a podcast about network automation, network engineering, Python, and a lot of technology topics. I'm your host, Eric Cho. Today on the show, we'll be talking Josh VanDeraa, managing consultant at Network to Code, and my fellow network automation enthusiasts. Josh shared his passion for network automation with open source project, speaking at various conferences, and also his book, Open Source Network Management. I am super excited to have Josh on the show today, and I know we'll have a great time chatting. So let's dive right in. Welcome, Josh.
Well, thank you for having me. Awesome day here. So.
Yeah, I think first of all, I bought your book. And then we also, kind of chatted here and there over Twitter. Obviously, it's a small community. So I'm very excited to finally, kind of meet you in person virtually and, kind of pick your brain a little bit.
Thank you. Well, first, thank you for the book purchase there. And yeah, it's I think I started to get involved in heavily in network automation community just as the COVID's timeframe kind of showed up. So getting together at a conference or something just wasn't one of those things that was going to happen too soon. But hopefully soon we can meet in person yet. So
yeah, absolutely, right? Like absolutely. I think so. My the third edition of the book came out just right around COVID. It was like 2020, like February of 2020. And the last conference I went to happened to be Pi Cascade. And I was able to actually have Guido and Rossum like hold on my book, luckily. But that was it, right? And then like 3 years after, boom, there's no in-person, at least for me, I have young kids. So I try not to try to be on the cautious side. So, it looks like it's coming back up and hopefully it'll stay that way. We all kind of took that in-person thing for granted for a while, I think.
Indeed. Very, very similar. It's again, got a young family at home myself, and it's get the opportunity and take the right opportunities. So,
yeah, for sure. So Josh, you mentioned you got into, like the network automation bit right around, early 2020, I would say, I think if I remember correctly. But like, how, do you, before we get started, tell us a little about yourself. How did you get into technology? What's your origin story?
Yeah, going back, I think I've always been that kid that's been interested in tech. Going way back, I have been fortunate enough to be able to have exposure to an Apple IIe, both at in growing up in grade school and at home a little bit. So I've always been into like sheets as well, and whatever the early Apple, Google Sheet predecessor was. I still remember doing things in that as a youngster. So was going through, did a lot of programming, and then all of a sudden found out about networking. And I said, oh my gosh, networking is awesome. And why have I not heard about this before? So
how was that like, right? So I think, for the guests on the show, there's like kind of two different paths. One is, I would say majority of them, goes from network engineering and maybe not even like a tech background before then, right? Like, so that's like me, I actually took my computer to Best Buy to have my RAM replaced, right? Like that's how bare I was before I even know about networking and then go into programming. And then on the other side, we have maybe like 30% of the guests, like yourself, they have computer, maybe programming or maybe system integration as a background, then goes into networking. So how was that like?
Yeah, so I did go to college for programming, or not for programming, it was telecommunication systems, but it was the Cisco Networking Academy, more or less. And so got exposure to many Cisco systems right from the get-go. It had a CS minor. I always did well, but once I got into the industry, I basically said, all right, skip the CS stuff that I had done because it was C++ at the time, and it wasn't something that was of huge interest at the time.
Yeah.
And so got into a large retailer and did second level support there for a while. Supported all pieces of hardware, servers, network gear, desktops, you name it, it was supported by us, even some serial based items. Type thing. So
like printers, like your parallel, printers.
No, serially connected, like just the items that give you price updates out on the retail floor. Those had some serial connections and had to do some troubleshooting. Some people good people on the street took care of actually being in front of it, but it wasn't quite IP.
So. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, because I did so I don't know what so you mentioned computer minor, right? So what was your major in college?
Yeah, it was telecommunication systems.
Okay, so so interesting. So it was like actually telecom was your major, and then CS was the minor. So yeah, so this is a little different. So I don't think my school actually even have a telecom major, but so I was a finance major.
Very few places. So
yeah. So so I was gonna say, like, so I did an internship in various locations, and one of it was like retail, and I was like, it's this place called Kmart. I don't know if you're familiar with it. Now it's like bankrupt, and there's like no Kmarts anymore, but it's like Walmart, right? But it's just called Kmart.
Yeah, the Kmart there's a nice 2-block walk for me growing up. So
okay, nice. Yeah, I don't know if you remember, but it was like a big K, right? It was like a big K, and then like I think they call it Super K or whatever. But yeah, so I'm familiar with what you're talking about, like the scanners, and also like the pricing check. All of these are proprietary, like pinouts and these stuff that have to be in a particular place. And yeah, it was painful.
Yeah, it brings some nightmares to me, that's for sure. So
all right, then let's quickly move on from there. So you mentioned network engineering. You did it was in college. You did help desk, second level support, and go into engineering. So how did you go from like maybe second level support into network engineering proper?
Yeah, so it was about a 3.5 year journey for me.
Okay, that's actually kind of short. So yeah, kudos.
Thank you. It was a long time in the seat myself. It felt like a long time originally, but in the grand scheme of things, still pretty short.
Yeah.
And so at the job, there was an opportunity to when they needed some additional help internally, hey, let's do an internal internship type thing. So got to get some experience of doing a replacement of a metro area network.
Oh, wow, nice.
So DWDM was definitely not something that I had learned about originally, and so got a little bit of DWDM experience. And after the project was done, and it became when a promotion type thing of once the role became available. A little bit of waiting the time. And there got a lot of exposure on all things except for data centers, I think, was at that place where got into the wide area network team and took care of responsibility for 2,000 stores, the wide area network and what that design looked like. Jumped over to a wireless team. And two totally different technologies and jumping around. And then finally a firewall team. But
how would you recommend people, because I would imagine a lot of people listening are thinking about career advancement, professional development, that sort of stuff, and you obviously if I'm hearing that correctly, is kind of you have a diverse interest, right? Like you're not worrying about pay, or you're not worrying about like job description, but you just kind of branch out. So how would you recommend people, if they wanted to do that, how would you like network and then get those exposure and opportunity?
Yeah, it's the people side of things. So that so talking about people, it's
layer 8 or layer 9.
It's always been keeping an eye on what else is out there in the environment, saying, okay, there's going to be usually an opening that's going to be coming up, and so it's not, it's not just around that time of the opening, but being able to be around and be present as part of the organization. So I think that's one of the things that I've usually brought is that even though I've got my narrow focus of what I should be looking at, I'm keeping an eye on the big picture. And that means, interacting back in things in an office in person. Hey, maybe going and catching a happy hour and being able to converse and meet with other people as well that might not be on your team directly.
Oh yeah, like being on a podcast with some stranger from across the nation.
Indeed, right? Always glad to do so. Gain out, and you never know what doors will be opened by just going out and talking to other people. Right,
I love that. I love that.
So
Like, man, that's the same way with me. It's always like, people talk about like a T-shaped person. So you go, wide and then you go very deep on that. And I've also heard about like an M-shaped person, right? So you actually go deep on several areas, like for yourself, maybe telecom and, Python, or maybe some other open source network project, Ansible, for example. Then, yeah, so then you kind of have those business sense as well, because being a consultant, I imagine that's a lot of the language that you need to get acquainted to.
yeah, indeed. It's that's one of the things that actually just has helped me out tremendously as a consultant. The retail industry was 13 years of my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was quite a bit of time, and understanding at the enterprise what's going on at that level, and then how can I help and be able to bring network automation along. It's want to eventually talk a little bit more about crawl, walk, run type things. And I know the first thing that as I look at is, I know in large enterprises of, hey, all of a sudden something breaks something, there's usually a reaction, and you want to make sure that you're not the one breaking something early, right?
Or fix it really quickly.
Indeed, with automation specifically, AAA is one of the things that everybody knows they got AAA on how you log into devices. But then when you apply automation, okay, you're usually thinking about how you connect to the devices, but not thinking about the AAA server on the back end and making sure that doesn't tip over. And so that's one of those fine balances. I have seen AAA tip over a few times in my career, and that doesn't recover very quick. So
yeah, make sure you have that out of bounds. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that I have to drive to like hub sites more than one time, just because I lock myself out of the console, and God forbid those dialing servers would work, and that you haven't checked. So for sure. So you mentioned network automation, right? So and you also mentioned you have this diverse interest. You're always keeping an eye out for what's on the horizon, open-minded, and talk to people, fixing problems. So how did you go from, second level support into network engineering, doing DWDM stuff, then now, getting into network automation? So how did that get started for you?
Yeah, it does go back. There was a strong focus to want to bring automation. This is back 2015 into the environment that we're at. I definitely want to give a shout out to one Jason Davis at Cisco. Mm-hmm. He's often, you see him at the NOC for Cisco Live and doing a few other things nowadays as well. But he was brought in not once but twice to kind of cover Python. And at that point, I'm like, that looks awfully awesome. I can actually the code that was presented on the screen. I could read and understand what it was doing, and so it wasn't so much just C++. You have over here, you have to set up all the memory, all the variables.
Oh my god, garbage collection.
You see a whole bunch in Python. It's just here and it does that.
Right.
And so that was kind of my introduction to Python, and it's been just all the way since then. Just keep on diving into various areas. Did a lot of Python originally at the retail organization, and I was on the firewall team at that point. So, I'll get into one of my favorite automations that I wrote early in my career. There was just looking at we had a table that was overflowing and causing impact. Just all of a sudden on the firewall, and
meaning like a TCAM cable, or like a routing table, or access list.
Yeah, like a TCAM table. It was around RPCs. RPC table was filling up. Okay, we have filed a bug with the vendor. It's definitely a bug. It's going to be fixed eventually. Has to go through all the QA and development of how to fix this. And there was no
6 months later, right?
Right. There was no SNMP. There wasn't anything. And I said, hey, I've got this fresh skill of network automation type thing that I'm doing. Why don't I just go ahead and write an automation that logs into the firewall every half hour, checks the size of the table. That was the first iteration. Yeah. And I said, all right, awesome. I'm getting counters, and so I can know when it's about to tip over. Yeah. And then eventually I just moved into, hey, I'm already logged in. I've issued this command every time that I've seen it in an errored state. Why don't I just have automation issue that command?
Right.
And so that that helped save from having to do a code upgrade.
Yeah.
And it probably would have been an emergency patch, not
Yeah.
necessarily, so not one that has the rigorous QA testing type
Right.
thing. It's a vendor supplied special patch, and that was just not something I want to do at the time. So
We will pause the programming with a special sponsor message from me, your host, Eric. Hey guys, when it comes to network automation, have you thought about joining a group of like-minded people to ask questions and get the support you need? I would like to invite you to the Network Automation Learning Community. It is free to join and a low-pressure, safe place to post questions, get answers, and just hang out. You can sign up at members.networkautomation.community. The link is also in the show notes. Now, back to regular programming. Like that kind of reminded me of the Atomic Habit book, right, by James Clear. It's like what he recommended was just do something incrementally. And so, for example, the example he gave was just going to the gym. Like, go to the gym 5 minutes and just get out, right? Like, you don't even have to stay.
yeah,
You just get there. So now it kind of matches what you were saying. What he talked about was going to the gym, and it's like, oh, you're there already. Why don't you do like some bench press, right? And then
yeah.
then bench press turns into some curls, and some curls turn into some squats, and so there you were. You log into the device and you're just checking the table. But yeah, why don't I just like clear that table real quick?
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And now, I'd probably also look at, okay, how can we monitor this table and
Right.
watch it go? But that's the iteration, right?
Yeah.
As in the journey of that, I wasn't much past the crawl stage. I was still just at my infancy on this, and so I was fortunate enough to have learned that just in time, because it saved me from many of weekends having to log in. I'll say that much.
Yeah.
So it was, and then also set up the notification. I never did get sign up notification, hey, that I cleared the table, and tell someone that I did it. But it was all just, I heard years later, hey, do we need to do anything special for this type thing? Even though I wasn't there anymore. So
Yeah.
that was, 5 years later, still one of my favorite stories.
Oh, totally. That was a great story. I think that kind of win is really important, especially early on, to encourage you to go through that process, see the validation. I mean, I won't name any names, but I did at one point, use automation to actually clear BGPs, right? Or like bounce BGPs here and there just to have it into a clean state. I mean, that's where most networks fall over, is when the state, I mean, not just networks, right? OS systems, right? For example,
Yeah.
like your memory leaks or whatever. That's why reboot always works, because it goes back into a known state, like a clean state. So the state out of whack is really the case. And like you said, sometimes you just have to make things work. So clearing table is fine, resetting BGP peers. Then if that gets you some like extra sleep at night, go for it.
Exactly. It's about, it helps to provide that work-life balance, right? That is still very, very important for me, and for that, be able to have that family time, and then be able to get away from the family as you need, or when the time is right. So
Yeah.
you're not disturbed on that side of things. So
Yeah.
or just your personal life, family life, personal life. It's all at that. It's all lumped together.
Yeah. Whatever is important to you, right?
Yes.
Yeah. If you
Yeah.
just like go relax and kick back, that's all the power to you, as soon as you get things done. And automation is one of these things that will probably get you there faster. So you mentioned both network automation and Python. And it's kind of interesting that you're probably like the fifth person from network to code. I haven't done my count, right? But it probably like 4 or 5 times already that we have people from network to code. So can you tell us a little bit about your day-to-day at network to code as a consultant for network automation specifically?
Yeah, definitely. So my day, so I'm a managing consultant. So I've got a
Okay.
team of engineers, awesome team. Absolutely love working with them, and got multiple customers right throughout the day of just helping them along in their automation journey. And so every client's at a different stage. Some are just a little bit above crawling. Some are already in the run phase before the fly stage of crawling is just
Nice.
getting started. Walking, hey, you got some scripts that are running, and that maybe being passed along. And then running being, hey, you've got these scripts that are now in a system that is there before you get into full self-service and, full loop back or feedback loops type things. So it's going to be, and the best part is it's pretty much every automation technology that's out there. So I've quite the breadth. Have some Ansible projects. We've got some Python projects. Getting into a lot with networked code and our sponsorship of the Nautobot project. A lot of Django as well, as far as providing APIs and starting to work with data and starting to look at the data side. Right? Yeah. The data is the new oil, and is often said, and the network is full of lots of information. Right. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I mean that's something that interesting enough, it's like every road goes back into data. So for me, at A10 doing security analysis that's networking related, definitely, like we actually have like millions and millions of records just on a daily basis. And it's close to like a bill, right? Like I couldn't even imagine back then. And so a lot of things breaks at scale, as you know. So so it's like keeping data and networking, like you said, it's just data, but actionable data, right? Like, what does this data mean, and what does it mean for me? Those are the true benchmark of how you're using that data, right? Data by itself probably means less.
Indeed. And, I mentioned data and looking at things on scale, right?
Yeah.
When you're talking about the size of the records you're seeing there at A10, right? It's, you can't really load that into Excel per se, right?
the 65,000 row limitation.
Yeah, I think would be
the old Excel, anyways. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to put an exception into the app to allow it to go bigger, and then even then you don't know if your machine will be able to still run after you try to run it, or load it up. And so that's another place that I've seen, and ask where do we get started at some point, and using Python just to parse through that data.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Yeah. So you talked about, helping clients and having these 3 different stages. So maybe, depending on their journey of, automation maturity. So, no right and wrong, right? It was basically just this continuum. And how would you help people? How would you determine first, right? Like if I'm just I don't know what anybody else does, right? Like I know we have some scripts and coming in, and I would just talk to this person called Josh about, helping me automate my network. What are the steps, and how would you go approach that?
Yeah. So steps there gets back to the human side of things. First
back
and
to
foremost,
that retail skills that you develop.
Even before you get into the tech side of things, you need to know, what's important to the organization. What are they measured on? Because usually measurements should come back and get rolled up in the grander scheme of the organization. Providing value. And so how can we then measure those what those metrics are at, and then how do we measure it, and then how do we improve it? Okay. Right. So you talk about process. You have to document the process. Is there a process documented? Should you be making a change record in an ITIL system? Sometimes changing a VLAN on a switch at some organizations might require a change record. Other organizations might have to go through a full CAD process for just a VLAN change, depending on where it is.
Right.
And so it's understanding that process and seeing how they do that. Is that someone you give it to the intern to log into the switch and make sure you have switch port VLAN add, or is this an automated script somewhere that's already in place? And so you never know where on the journey someone is.
Like you just reminded me of like adding a VLAN to the trunk, whether that you have to add the keyword or you just like override everything, and it's like, oh well, I guess that's I hope that the road is clear, because I'm just gonna go drive in the console in or something.
Yes, I know. I've been on. I'm sure I've probably done that early in my career, perhaps, and even not so long ago when I had a L2 WAN provided, and all of a sudden every circuit except for one circuit, and that's the new one that's being provisioned, went down. and every other one, so just that one is up. Yeah, all right, that's all right. It happened. We've all been there.
Yeah.
Or we've all at least heard about that being there if you haven't been there.
My friend had told me.
Yes.
Yes. So. Yeah, those are like interesting war stories that you hear. But hopefully it's just like you do that once, right? And then from there on, you got to add the keywords and yeah. Even as a young engineer, I didn't even know that you have to clean like the air filter of the routers. So back then, like GSR was this beast, right? And we had like,
I learned something now here, and I know I haven't done that.
Yeah, that's not something you could like really automate, right? Because you had to go physically pull that out. But yeah, so that's just kind of interesting. Brings me back of all these memories and just to finish that thought, like, yeah, so GSR was like this either a quarter of a rack or half a rack, and it goes up to like the full rack and this beast, right? But there's like the airflow, and so of course it was like, I think it was front back to front airflow or something like that. And so there's obviously air filters, and data center tend to be like pretty dirty. And so so once in a while you actually have to go like pull out the filter, and then just like your HVAC system at home.
Yep.
So yeah, like if you don't clean those, then eventually it's going to cause a problem, and it's going to clog up and overheat and so on. And then that's when you have some interesting like intermittent outage, and the tech people, you open a tech case and they'll be like, I don't know, like this just goes out here every once in a while. We don't really know what's going on.
Yeah, that might be the actual static electricity piece. But and just to finish the thought on how we get in and go through the process, right? And then we're always thinking with the business in mind.
Yeah.
Right. As much, one of my personal lines is you can have the greatest network in the world, but if you don't have any applications running over it, there isn't necessarily, why do you have that network?
Yeah.
Right. Even your home network, it's awesome. That's how we're doing this particular podcast is over home networks. And so there are applications absolutely in most, every network there is. So we are very focused on getting outcomes that provide value as part of our engagement. So
nice. I love that. I think that's something that maybe being a pure technical engineer wouldn't be primarily focused on, right? Because you're actually several layers removed from the business side of things. So you're worried about adding VLANs, you're worrying about, having, bits or traverse over your wires. But at the same time, it's at the end of the day, it's you're not getting the business doesn't derive value from the connectivity. It derives value from the service that running on top of the connectivity. So it's absolutely critical, as you stated, to get those. What are those metrics that you're measuring, and then make sure you're improving those key metrics.
Yep, and metrics speak volumes, right? From whether it's a financial metric of what is the cost of this particular piece, or if it's a metric around, hey, we need to have packets getting round trip in 15 milliseconds from point A to point Z, right?
Yeah.
And so that's where the various levels of engineering and automation come in. Of just whether it's measuring metrics or if it's reporting on the metrics.
I was going to say, like, speaking from the true telecom engineer, right? Like typically people say from A to B, like point A to point B, but A to Z, that's like, that's your telecom side coming up.
Yep. And in Minneapolis, I'm in Minneapolis, which I'd say is a tech edge type thing. Like Cloudflare just turned up a new speed test, and my place for it is I'm connecting out to Chicago, right? So, there's then usually a whole bunch of other hops in between there, right? So the Z part is absolutely further, not just an A and B.
Yeah. No, I remember when I was like buying fibers and, getting, it's always like A to Z and, like they're just skipping and obviously, there's a bunch of stuff in the middle. DWDM maybe, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. So what are some of the big obstacles? So as in your path toward talking to the customers and, the different maturity levels, what are some of the obstacles you see from people getting into automation themselves?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is the unknown, right?
Okay.
And that's, I like to say that, especially for our new hires coming in, we've seen quite a bit already. And so that's where some of the experience comes in. but then it is gaining that experience of, you know, I was fortunate enough early in my automation journey to have some lab devices. I think either lab or still some GNS3 type thing. Just being able to log in and test things, right? And be able to do debug commands if you want to get real down into lower levels of what's going on. And so it's been that is usually the first thing. And then they also, oftentimes a lot of people think too big. It's one of the big things, network automation is big. It's a big elephant. Well, there's the old adage of, okay, how do you eat an elephant? Just one bite at a time. So it starts somewhere. Just you got to get out and start. And I think a lot of times the big, I just talked about that. I like the big picture, but automation is the big picture, and sometimes you do have to bring it into focus and just try to tackle the first thing in front of you.
So what do you think that's like would be a good first thing to tackle, right? So I've asked this question multiple times to different people, and I'd like to get your perspective on that.
Well, my first perspective is definitely going to be in the read-only. So being able to log into a device, if you're using Python, we'll just use Python and say NetMiko from Kirk Byers. Go in and do a show version. There's always vulnerabilities coming out. And so maybe the first thing you do is create a CSV that logs into all the devices. It's not something you need to do, in parallel. This is something you can do serially because Python and it's being able to spread out and multi-process. And threading, that is definitely a very advanced topic. And so, just start with gathering the versions. And so that way, hey, the next time there's a PCERT that comes out against your devices and they say these versions are vulnerable, these are not. You have that data, right? And you can run that every quarter if you're doing quarterly code upgrades or what that path looks like. So,
I think it's also important that you mentioned about practice and doing read-only, right? So now it's not just a complete unknown. You actually turn the read-only bit into a known, right? Like you now know this is how you could do it, not impacting anything. You're just doing a show version. But even that bit is helpful, as you said, like when you do a quarterly audits, right? I don't know, you're probably in the retail space, but it also especially in like healthcare space, there's a strict amount of audits and so on. And I don't know about you, I don't like logging into device 1,000 times and just doing show version. So there you go.
Agreed. That is one of the biggest pieces driving the network industry is regulation, right? And I think there's even if I remember reading right, it's been a little while since I've had to worry about PCI deeply. But I think I read.
Well, lucky you, lucky us.
Yeah, indeed. I think I read in the PCI 4. If I'm not, I could be very wrong about this. So I'm stepping out.
Somebody will correct us in the comments or whatnot.
Very much so. But I think it says if you're running end of support software, that that's a failing item on top of PCIs there.
Yeah, right? For sure.
And so now, all right, knowing your software versions, maintaining the software versions becomes a very big, important part of the day-to-day operations of the network. So yeah,
for sure. I think that's definitely a red flag when you're doing an end of support. And in fact, that's like, I think a lot of the, I don't want to say excuse, but like the reason for a lot of companies to get over the hurdle moving from like Python 2 to Python 3 is like Python 2.7, it's no longer supported, and you better just get on with it, and just going to be like security patches, and failing that part is where it's unacceptable for a lot of companies, and therefore they're forced to go to Python 3 after dragging their feet for like 10 years.
Yeah, and actually, I think I just commented in some conversation today. Python 3.7 is also end of support this year.
Oh, no kidding! Oh, okay.
So if I'm trusting
like 3.8, 3.10, and 11, and yeah.
Yep, I'm trusting my peers that sent that message right here on the show. So I'm sure I'll be corrected again. So.
Nah, it's all good. I mean, if it's not, it should be like going out to 3.8 anyways, right? Like it's got all the async goodies from 3.7 and on. So you should be going up there. Thank you for listening to part 1 of the interview with Josh. Stay tuned for next week where we talk more Python and more Nango automation. See you there.